Welcome to IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Don.
Coming at you live from San Francisco, California.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
All right, greetings everyone, and welcome back to another great episode of IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Daniel Lowry, and in today's episode, it's all about the A+ series. That's right, continuing on in that track, our 22902 to be exact, and joining us back in the studio. You know him, you love him, he's number one in your hearts. He's Mr. Wes Bryan. Wes, welcome back, sir. How's it going today?
Man, it's going great. Thanks for setting the bar pretty high on this one. Hopefully you'll help me hold that bar up for sure.
Good luck with that.
That's right. But like Dan says, that's right. We're back with more of our 902 exam content, and we're going to be moving into, well, we're going to take your head and put it right in the clouds today, right? Some might say, well, that's where my head is every day. But joking aside, ladies and gentlemen out there, we're going to talk about some of the basic cloud concepts that you have to be aware of for the exam. Moving along in our objectives, if you're following along out there, we're looking at 2.3, identify basic cloud concepts. So as far as the objective title goes, it's pretty similar to what you'll see if you are looking at the exam objectives. Now, cloud concepts, right? When we talk about cloud concepts, I want you to, you ladies and gentlemen out there, to understand that virtualization that we've talked about in a past episode is really how we get cloud-based technologies today, all right? The ability to run more than one instance of an operating system on a single physical device, right? On a much larger scale, though, it's server-side virtualization through things like clustering multiple servers together, and they work in tandem. We have these large data centers that allow, through a paid or measured service, allow you to go to a provider essentially and buy the resources you need, depending on what it is that you're trying to accomplish, all right? So I went ahead and I talked about right off the top measured service, all right? What do we mean when we say measured service? Well, one of the benefits of the cloud is that, well, you don't have to maintain a lot of your own infrastructure, right? You can go to a provider. And when I say provider, I'm not talking about an internet service provider, because you're still going to need an internet service provider because it requires an internet connection for the majority of our cloud-based models. Now, one of them doesn't really require an internet connection, but usually when you get to this scale of one of the models, you're going to have an internet connection, a lot of times just due to the geographical distribution. We'll talk about cloud types here coming up. All right, but either way, it's going to be a measured service, all right? And a measured service means that depending on how much computational power, how many applications we need to run, how many users we're going to have, what kind of virtual machines we need to support our infrastructure, we're going to pay. But the great thing about this is you're only pay for those services that you need, all right? So let me go ahead and compare and contrast, if you will, a little bit, cloud versus what we call on-premises, right? Because these are two concepts that, while they don't really call them out in the exam, generically speaking, you need to be aware of the difference between on-premise resources and a measured service or a cloud-based resource. All right, when we say on-premise, all right, if we were to walk over to the IT Pro TV server closet, you would see that we have a series of servers in there. We have switches, we have all kinds of video gear, communication gear, voice over IP technologies, right? On-premises, right? That's on our local, within our local building. Now, the thing to keep in mind about that is that we need to manage and maintain it. Now, thank goodness Wes doesn't have to manage and maintain it, or we probably wouldn't be able to even bring you this video right now. We have some people that are trained and they can manage and maintain this. A lot of the people that you don't see, majority of the people that you don't see behind the cameras are the ones that are trained in order to bring us this content, right? But that's people we have within our physical building, all right? You might be a company that maybe you don't want to go through the you go through, and I say problem, it sounds like you guys out there that are helping us edit these videos and stuff and helping us bring this content, you guys aren't problems. That's not what I mean. Your company might not have the additional resources, right, that it takes, because it does. It takes money, it takes time, it takes effort, right, to train people to manage a server, to manage a switch, to manage a voice over IP communication, in order to be able to edit and bring and stream these videos, to stream them, if you will, out to you guys, right? So what can you do? If you're a company that doesn't have those additional resources, what do you do? Well, you get a measured service. You go to a provider that says, hey, you know what? We've got a huge network. In fact, we've got networks all over let's say the continental United States or even North America, right? Internationally, we have networks. And I tell you what, if you come to us, we'll give you give us money, we'll charge you monthly for this service, and depending on what you need, we'll give you access to our network. But what you don't have to do is manage the network. You don't have to pay the electrical costs that it takes to keep the equipment running. You don't have to have the technicians. You don't have to train the technicians in order to use these. We'll do that for you. And that's one of the benefits of the cloud. The cloud says, well, you know what? We'll pay somebody to use their network. We'll pay somebody to use their applications, and they're going to manage updates. They're going to manage the flaws, the development side of it, right? The management and maintaining of that, and all you have to do is just connect through the internet.
So we're basically outsourcing or at least a lot of the administration that would normally go into a standard on-premises network.
And most definitely, that's exactly what it is. All right, so what different models do we have, right? Well, we have to understand that, again, like I said, it's based on what you might need to do. All right, maybe you're one that says, you know what, I don't want to set up email servers. I don't want to set up a web application server to serve up some kind of web application. I don't want to have to manage and maintain a line of business software. Well, it's great that you have a platform that allow you to basically pay somebody else to do that. And the first one that we talk about, you'll see that these terms are abbreviated, SaaS. That's something known as software as a service. So let's go ahead and let's dive into a little diagram that I've got that kind of explains what software as a service is. All right, now I had to put a cloud in there, right? We can't talk about a cloud, but really, when it comes down to it,
actually have a visual cloud.
That's right.
Makes sense.
But keep in mind, it's up there on the internet, right? The World Wide Web, if you will.
Right? That's what we used to call the cloud, was the web.
Yes, yeah, that's
went from a web, now it's a cloud. God knows what it'll be in the future.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, as long as it's not a storm, we're okay,
yeah.
Right? So keep in mind that what you're doing here essentially is you are paying somebody else that has the infrastructure to support the applications, and they maintain them. And what you do is you pay per user and per amount of applications that you're using. Some of you probably used it before, and you didn't even realize it, right? Have you ever used something like Gmail, Hotmail, Outlook, if you will? You've used it. Have you ever used Google Docs? Have you ever used Outlook? Not Outlook, but Office 365? This is software as a service, right? Because you're going to their platform. And yeah, you've got to do a little bit of configuration, right? You got to set up your user account.
Even things like Facebook and Instagram would be considered software as a service because they're giving you an interface that is completely controlled by them. You just log in and utilize the interface, which is a type of software.
That is a great analogy. Social media is a classic example of software as a service. Do you manage the servers at Facebook? If you've ever seen the size of their warehouses, you're probably glad that you don't, right? Right? You don't manage the servers on the back end when it comes to things like your Gmail account, right? Sometimes they're free. Okay, so understand, you're like, well, those are all free. Those aren't a measured or paid service in any way. No, they're not, but you can definitely get into a paid account where if you do this and integrate it in business, you're going to pay. All right. So that's one of the things. Now, what's one of the other benefits of all these different technologies, right? We get what's known as redundancy and recovery. What do I mean by redundancy? I want you to think about the last time outside of your internet connection, whether it's your fault, your device's fault, your ISP's fault, how many times have you ever had to walk over and reboot a server if you've got Gmail or you've got Hotmail, Outlook.com as it was called today, Yahoo Mail? Probably never once, right? That's because on the back end, their technicians, when a server fails or a cluster, a group of servers fail, they fail you over to another site and it's transparent to you. So you get the benefit of redundancy without having to manage it on premise. Recovery, if you will. When's the last time you've actually had to roll out and develop, manage, and maintain updates for Facebook, for Twitter, for LinkedIn, right? Gmail, Ymail? Probably never, right? That's because on the back end, they're the ones doing it. And that's one of the benefits of a cloud-based solution like software as a service here. Same thing with the maintenance. What do you need? Well, the only thing we need to really worry about on our end is paying our internet bill, having internet connection, having some kind of ISP, and one of the most prevalent pieces of software within any operating system? The web browser.
That's right.
Right? The web browser needs to connect. And that's one, again, that's one of the beneficial things. It's one reason I start here is because it's one of the most common in today's environments, right? Because some of these other ones that we're going to talk about platform as a service, we're going to talk about infrastructure as a service. Behind the scenes, if you're just getting into this, you might not be able to relate to that. But it's a very rare day in today's society, today's day and time and day, if you will, that somebody can't at least relate to having, some kind of hosted software as a service-based email, right? Cloud-based email solution. And like Dan said, things like social media technologies that are out there, right? WordPress is another one. Now, some of them blur the line because they do allow you to set up your own on-premise and cloud-based solution. Now, when we start mixing on-premise and cloud-based solutions, they become what are known as hybrids. Because why? Well, it's not strictly a cloud-based solution only. It's not strictly an on-premise. It's actually two different models at the same time, so they'll call it hybrid. We'll talk about another situation in which you can also see hybrid as well, but that's definitely one of them. Now, I mentioned infrastructure as a service. We're going to go ahead and we're going to switch over to infrastructure as a service. What you think about this, all right? Your company needs to be able to have 100 desktop experiences with 100 line of business applications. Well, one of the great things, we have an offering, a service, if you will, another measured service called infrastructure as a service. And what that does is it provides you with the computational resources that you need to run things like operating systems, right? We talked about virtualization in another episode in which I can run virtual machines, more than one virtual machine, more than one operating system on a single physical device. Imagine being able to serve that up to your end users and all they have to do is log into a desktop. And you don't have to manage the computer, the operating system updates. You don't have to manage some of the things in the background. You don't have to worry about RAM failing. You don't have to worry about a CPU failing. You don't have to worry about a hard drive failing either. All you have to do is pay somebody. You have to worry about the pocketbook, right? And the other thing too about this that's really great is it's got scalability. All right? It's what we call on demand, right? Now, when we say on demand, again, it's relative to the money that you have to pay somebody. But let's say today Dan says, hey, you know what, Wes, I'm going to have 100 users, and these 100 users, I'm going to need them to have these software applications, right? And that's where we get into software as a service. I say, okay, Dan, I got that set up. We've got our software as a service. We've got an Office 365 account, right? It gives us Excel. It gives us Notepad. It gives us Word. It gives us Outlook, right? So now we got our email set up. But then it says, also, I'm going to need them to be able to log into desktops too. Well, that's where infrastructure as a service comes, right? It gives us access to things like networking, communications, operating systems, and even servers if we want, virtual servers, virtual machines. Well, here's the thing. Black Friday comes out. If you're here in the States, you know that during the Thanksgiving season, right, we have what's known as Black Friday, right? And you're an online distributor, right, of some kind of product. All right, maybe multiple products. Black Friday comes out and your company exponentially grows. And you now need, Dan says, I need 100 more desktops. I need 100 more accounts created.
Right. Servers, right?
Servers
to handle the load. I mean, and those things are not cheap. You ever spec'd out a server? They cost a little bit of the ching-ching right here.
Most definitely. And let's think about it this way, too, Dan. They also cost a lot of money to install and get into your server closet, right? I mean, that is time-consuming.
Then what happens when Black Friday is over?
You don't
what do
need
I
them
do with
anymore.
that hardware that I have now purchased? Is it sitting in a rack that I had to pay to get in there? It's just going to sit there till next Black Friday?
That's
or
right.
Hopefully that our business did really well and just our standard daily business jumps up to where I utilize those resources? I mean, that would be nice, but probably not going to happen.
Right, and it comes into the whole ROI thing, return on investment. It usually takes a company a minimum of 3, as well as up to 5 years to have a return on investment where they've actually paid for a product and it's paying them to use it now, right? So the on-demand access is the fact that Dan could call me up and say, hey, Wes, I need 10 more servers, I need 100 more user accounts, and I need 100 more desktops with 100 more instances of Office 365, right? Well, don't think that it's not going to cost you, right? But your return on investment is also the what we call elasticity too, right? I want you to think of it elastic, right? A rubber band. I could stretch it out, and then when I let it go, yes, I snap myself, it hurts. but it also goes back to the original size.
I've actually got a great analogy for elasticity. Think of it as the stretchy pants for Thanksgiving, right? Normally, I don't need the waistline of a 48 waistline, right? Normally, I'm typically a 38. Yeah, that's right. And but when Thanksgiving comes, I need more room in the britches, right? Because I'm going to eat a lot of food. So they stretch out, allowing me to expand my capabilities of my pants to accommodate the need. Same thing with elasticity inside of cloud technologies. I'm expanding rapidly. I need more room to move. Therefore, the servers ramp up, and I can do all this automatically. I don't have to do anything. I just set it and say, if I need more resources, add them up to X amounts, right? Because obviously, money is going to be a factor in those things. But the same idea, as my pants need to grow, as my server farm needs to grow, the demand is there, it grows as needed. When the demand goes away, well, guess what? It shrinks back down.
I'm over here dying because I'm like, that is a great analogy. I'm over here cracking up, but that's absolutely correct, right? When we need it, we can expand our network. We can expand those resources.
You'll never think of elasticity
I'll
the same
never think
again.
of elasticity in the same way again. That's right. But you guys can relate to that, right? I need it now, so I expand out.
Right.
I don't need it tomorrow. I can reduce it. And guess what? The price point, the return on investment, I get it almost immediately, right? Immediately, because guess what? I no longer have to pay for those servers. All right, now I'm not saying fire your 100 employees, but I don't need those employees. Maybe they were temps, right? I don't need them now because the demand's no longer there, right? So that's the great thing about the elasticity, rapid elasticity, more so than anything else, right? What else do we have? So if our infrastructure as a service really is the computational power, right? Memory, storage, network communications, operating systems that you need to run. I said servers because, again, remember, a server is a combination of those physical resources and the operating system really pretty much rolled into one package, right? Well, the next one is going to be platform as a service. Now, this is the one, if you're first getting into A+, that probably most of you will relate to the least. Why? Now, if you're coming from a development environment, you're going to relate to this one probably the most, right? Imagine I need to work with some kind of software, all right? We're doing some kind of software development. All right, well, in order to have that development environment, all right, you're going to need servers. Well, I've got that with infrastructure as a service. But you're also going to need a runtime environment. And what I mean by a runtime environment is an application works within a set type of environment. So for instance, a lot of times in the Windows environment, right, we need .NET framework. Well, guess what? We have to set all that up. We have to set up that operating system. We have to set up that runtime environment so that my programs can be tested within it. All right, well, guess what? That's where platform as a service comes in. Because what it does is when you combine it with things like infrastructure as a service, you get that runtime and execution environment, you get the infrastructure, if you will, to support the computational power of the applications that you're testing. Right? Development teams, if you will, they can work with all of the common program languages. Now, you don't have to understand anything about programming, because I could spell C++ on a good day. You don't have to understand anything about development or programming, right? If you want to learn a little bit more about development, check out our development courses. We've got DevPro TV, and if you want to learn a foreign language, that's going to be your platform for sure. All right, and I joke around about it, but I'm serious too, because I don't understand programming. And with platform as a service, I don't need to understand it. As an administrator, a development person can come to me and say, this is what I need. And I can say, okay, I can spin up an instance and I can pull down this modularly, if you will, and I can bring up that environment for you, and now you can work with it.
Even further than that, if you have a few developers with any kind of wits about them, which they are usually pretty smart people, I can even remove myself from the equation altogether as a systems administrator. Whereas before, in a traditional model, they need a development environment. We want to test an application, we want to write it in this. I got to have a Windows 2000 something or other server, right? I've got to have this development platform to run on that because that's what we're writing it in. And I need network connectivity to it. I need access from here, access from there. I'm doing a lot of work as an admin of things I'm never going to touch. And then when it comes time for updates, I've got to do all that, right? I'm basically supporting my developers so they can test things. And that takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort. Now, like Wes said, we can go to this PaaS environment and say, okay, well, I can just go into AWS or Windows Azure and fire that up. There you go, platform as a service, log in, here's your credentials, go crazy and enjoy. But I can take it one step further and go, you know what? I can give you a login with the ability to fire it up yourself, because all you're doing is going, I need a Windows server with this environment already built in. Click, click, click. You click your way through, and it's done. They can do that themselves. They can follow a wizard that allows them to develop that themselves. It's very simple, and they're up and running. I'm now out of the loop completely. All the updates are being done by our cloud provider. All the hardware redundancy is being done by the cloud provider. I don't even need to get involved other than making sure they don't go crazy with spending, right? And I can even input spending caps inside of the environment as an administrator of the cloud service that we've rented out. It's really nice.
And you know what? Again, to continue on that line of thinking, that's exactly what we do here at IT Pro TV. By far, one of our best, most knowledgeable subject matter experts, probably more so than anybody I've seen ever, is Don Pizzette. And he fully understands the cloud platforms that we use. I mean, inside and out. And he does a lot of things around here. And one of the things that you've probably seen is that he also does shows. Well, he's actually removed himself a lot from that development environment. And our dev team and our lead developer does exactly what just what Dan's talking about. Brings down that environment, spins it up, and then hands it out to the rest of the dev team, and then they collaborate together, and then when it's no longer needed, it's gone. Yep. Right? And then we can do things that you don't have to worry about here. They call it chargeback metering. That's another cloud-based technology. It goes beyond this exam. But chargeback metering is just essentially, if I need to find out which departments are using what within our cloud-based environment, I need to know which manager and which team to charge it to, right? So it helps us also to do with basically resource and monetary allocation, right? It's accountability. So it's a great thing to have. Now, those are a little bit about the different infrastructures that we have, and we definitely want you guys to be aware of them out there, all right? Now, the next thing I want to mention just a little bit are some of the different cloud, we've talked about the cloud solutions that you have, services they call it, we call them services solutions. A lot of times they're going to be interchangeable. But there are different models you need to be aware of too, all right? And in the exam objectives, they call out public, private, hybrid, and community. Oh goodness, so what the heck are they talking about? When we say public cloud, all right, when we say public cloud, what we're talking about is you go to somebody like AWS, somebody like, Dan mentioned the other, a couple of them here, right? AWS, Amazon Web Services, even though they don't like to be called Amazon Web Services, AWS, Windows Azure, right? Microsoft's solution, right? These are gigantic solutions. And in fact, to give some credit to our chat room, in fact, one of our faithful members out there that's in the chat room almost every day mentions this. Says that the software as a service that we use today has a massive redundancy, so much so that we're talking about multiple geographical locations. And I mean continental. We're talking about not just regions, we're talking about entire continents. All right, and a public resource like that, a public cloud, means you're using their infrastructure, solely their infrastructure, all right? What's a private cloud? Now, a private cloud's a little bit different, all right? Let me give you kind of an example here of a private. This is actually a hybrid model that I've got, but we'll go ahead and we'll talk about it in both contents. So the diagram that I have here is actually what's known as a hybrid model, and the reason I say that is because we're using some private cloud. If we focus in on this main office here, and if I'm maintaining and managing, if I'm maintaining all of the resources myself, and they're my servers, my data centers, my connections, guess what? That's called a private cloud. Now, that's very, very expensive, but it does give me the ability to have multiple geographical locations that can communicate with my own internal resources, and I don't have to share them with anybody else. Now, you have to be very expensive. It is very expensive. You have to have a lot of money to do something like this, right? Some companies might be able to justify it. When security, which security isn't so much an issue anymore, it was for a while. Some people would be like, well, we don't know about the whole security thing, right? With the cloud, there's certain information that I just can't have in the cloud because I don't know if it meets compliance standards. That's long been not an issue. In fact, you can go to AWS, you can go to the Azure websites, and they have more documentation than you ever want to read in your life on the different security standards that they follow. But that was, in the earlier days, that was definitely a concern, all right? It's private cloud, all right? Then you have the hybrid cloud, and that's actually what this is. This is a hybrid cloud. And why is that? Well, I have some I have some resources on site, right? So I can manage those, maintain them. Those are private, right? Some kind of private cloud. I've got a main office, right? And the main office allows all these connections. Even though it's cloud-based to us, it's because I'm connecting to different locations regardless of where I'm at, geographically distributed. But then we have some sites that, well, they just don't have any on-site resources. I don't have any on-site, if you will, servers. I don't, I might have just like a network switch where we can connect outbound to the internet, but for the most part, I don't have on-site resources. So what do we use? We use part of the public cloud as well. So public and private is your hybrid cloud. All right, now the other one that they also call out is what's known as a community cloud. And I'm going to change this pretty much all around. All right, I want you to take something like a doctor's office. So we'll say DR1. All right, so for a doctor's office, but then we also have insurance companies. All right, so we'll just say insurance. I always get that wrong. Insurance one. All right, now a community is where typically you have essentially a private cloud that is being utilized by more than one organization, all right? And you might say, well, how is that beneficial? Well, one of the examples I kind of give is I want you to take a doctor's office, right? If a doctor's office and an insurance company need to make things like claims to Medicare and stuff like that, chances are they probably need access to the same information, right? A doctor's and insurance office, right? So you can see something like that where they have a community cloud. They have a mutual benefit, right? And the benefit is obviously servicing the customers that they're supporting. So the doctor's office has access to certain HIPAA compliant records where, well, guess what? It's private healthcare information, private health information, PHI as it's called. The insurance company needs access to that kind of information as well. All right, so you can have a community cloud where the goal is similar on both, sides of their businesses. So they share resources. All right, now, whether there's commonality in that, I'm not really sure. I don't have any statistics on it. But I do know that one of the most common ones is a public only and a hybrid model. All right, those are two of the most common, right, is the fact that everything's in the cloud or portions are on-premise and portions are in the cloud as well, the hybrid model. So those are a few different models that we want you to be aware of. Again, remember public, private, hybrid, and community. Again, remember with community, it gets a little confusing sometimes because you might say community is a hybrid and not necessarily does it have to be hybrid, right? Everything can be in the cloud. Everything can be in the cloud in a community. It just means you have more than one organization accessing the same cloud resources, right? If Dan has company one, right, well, let's get community out of it. Dan's got company one, I've got company two. All right, we can both go to AWS, right, and get our own cloud-based services, but they're isolated from each other. Dan's information on AWS isn't allowed to see mine, and I'm not allowed to see it. We're completely two separate customers, right? You don't see that's different, right? That's one of the benefits too of the cloud-based solution too, is that isolation, right, between tenants. They call it tenant isolation, right? A community though is where you have the same cloud resources and two different companies access those same resources. So just be careful. I want to make sure that I clarify on that. Remember, cloud has its benefit. If you're a smaller company and you can't afford the hundreds of thousands of dollars that it could cost to manage, maintain, train teams to do specialized management of your infrastructure on premise, you can pay somebody who already has the network, already has those resources, has the highly trained staff. They can do it for you, and you can just pay them a service, right? So keep in mind, cloud is here, cloud is where it's at, cloud is here to stay. And in fact, if there's any piece of advice on any technology within the A+ series that I can tell you, you really should be studying, it better be the cloud. Because the cloud isn't going away, and it's only getting more prevalent, and it's getting more and more popular as time progresses.
All right, Wes, I totally agree with everything you just said there. Cloud is definitely, it is the present, and it definitely will be the future as well. So take some time, understand the difference of the cloud types, the cloud models, right? Whether or not it's a private, public, hybrid, or community. Know those like the back of your hand. Also know the differences between things like IaaS, SaaS, and PaaS, because they're probably going to hit you with some type of question of, here is the setup, what type of cloud model is that? And you got to be able to, oh, well, that's platform as a service, no problem. Click, and move on to the next one. So be familiar with those. Very good stuff. And Wes, you did a great job presenting that, explaining it for you. We appreciate that. We hope you guys enjoyed it out there, and maybe even were a little bit entertained if we could get away with that. But we are out of time for this episode, so we're going to have to sign off. For IT Pro TV, I've been your host, Daniel Lowry.
And I'm Wes Bryan.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.